Christian Zeron is a vintage watch buyer and seller. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about what to look for in a vintage watch. And he makes a lot of revenue selling these old watches. I had him on the podcast to talk about these vintage watches. As you can see here, I'm not into watches. I actually don't like typing with watches. They always get so scratched up. I used to wear a watch, and actually, I see a watch the same way I see a dress-up shirt, which is not wearing it is actually way more powerful, because why do I want to be locked down? What is this, corporate America locking me down with a watch? Same way with a dress shirt. I'll wear a t-shirt. Anyway, Christian Zeron, great dude, and we talked about a couple really good things that you'll get value from, which is, number one, how to sell into competitive industries. So vintage watches is a pretty competitive industry. It's something that's existed for a long time. It doesn't matter how long an industry has existed for, there's always room for new people. There are always people leaving the industry, and there's always an opportunity to do something a little bit different. And Christian did that by vlogging, very similar to Wine Library TV and Gary Vaynerchuk. He talked a little bit about this in the podcast as well, how he was influenced by Gary Vaynerchuk, and he made these YouTube videos where he's reviewing the watches, and that worked. How to sell into competitive industries was really important. The other thing we talked about was the opportunities that exist in buying and selling. I actually used this as inspiration for a $100 test for selling vintage Las Vegas clothes. Based on this interview, I did that, and there's another YouTube video you could watch that talks about the results of that experiment. So check this interview out with Christian Zeron, all about buying and selling vintage watches. Here we go. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we're talking to Christian Zeron. He's the founder, director, and curator of Theo and Harris. Since launching in 2013 as a sophomore from Seton Hall, he's led his company to a top position in its retail market, hosted nearly 800 episodes on YouTube, and worked tirelessly to pioneer the vintage watch renaissance. Welcome to the podcast, Christian.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me on.
Dude, what are you at now? 80,000 subs on YouTube?
No, not yet. We're at 63, but growing quickly this week.
What was your goal? Like, why did you get into YouTube originally, and how have you seen it kind of play out?
We were on Instagram first. It was Instagram when I decided I was going to start a watch shop. Then the watch shop launched like 3 months later. So at that point, watches weren't selling. So I just said, okay, anything that is selling because I'm able to communicate with clients directly through like creating content. So what are other ways we can create content? And then YouTube was kind of a natural evolution. Mind you, when we started on YouTube, we did one video a week, and it was bad, and it was really kind of poorly produced and bad audio and all that stuff. But we tried. That was the beginning of the whole thing.
How long were you making videos before you were selling on YouTube, or was it pretty quick?
Our YouTube video was the first our first Theo Harris video was the first YouTube video we've ever done. Period. That launched September after we launched the company. We launched the company in February, so 6-ish months after starting the company. We said, you know what, let's give this YouTube thing a shot, and now it's become basically one of probably the most important medium that we have.
I definitely see the power of YouTube. How long was it though? Because you said you weren't getting many sales on Instagram. You started the YouTube channel, and then you started seeing sales. Like, how quickly after those first few videos?
It's hard to say. Well, when we launched the company itself, we didn't sell anything for a couple of weeks, and then even after that, we were only selling once or twice a month. We're talking about like doing $2,000 in sales a month or $3,000 in sales a month. So not even close to sustenance. I mean, my overhead was super low because I was in college and all that stuff, and I wasn't really investing in the company. But still, I mean, it was terrible profit. But when we launched on YouTube, still was not quick. I mean, we were on YouTube for a year before I think we even hit 1,000 subscribers or something like that, like 1,100 subscribers after a year, which is terrible. I mean, I don't know anyone that did as poorly as we did for the first, year, maybe more. And that was 100% our fault. We were focusing on 100 different things and nothing really that well, So it took a long time for YouTube to actually start to play out. But in retrospect, we're building the kind of foundation of a community and a relationship with thousands of customers all over the world.
I was just doing videos about anything. It really is. There's something to be said about focusing. Like, you're doing just watches. I was doing just business content. And then as soon as we started focusing, the subs started going up.
Yeah, exactly right. But it's when you're in it, it's so much harder to see. I mean, I remember making all these videos and working pretty hard at it and putting ourselves out there and embarrassing ourselves for basically no return, which is terrible. And then you would see somebody that started a YouTube channel on a Wednesday and 6 weeks later had 8,000 subs, and you're like, what is that guy doing that I'm not? But I think that sometimes when you're in it and you're so afraid to admit where you're wrong, it just makes everything worse. When you're afraid to not be aware and kind of own that you're not that good at this right now, you just prolong the issue.
The thing I get stuck on constantly, it's a psychology thing for sure. It's and I'm sure you get this too. You start making a watch video, or at least for me, I start making a sales video or a marketing video, and then part of me is like, why am I doing another one of these? I'm just making one of these because I know it's gonna work. And then I have to like talk myself into doing it and like find a new angle and all that sort of stuff. But you can get trapped there, like thinking you're the watch guy or whatever.
When you're creating content, when you're creating, when you're talking about the news, a lot of the news is repetitive. You do say the same thing a lot of the time. It's up to you to put a new spin on it. But then, in the end, it's also, is that such a bad thing? I mean, is it, in my field, a lot of the sentiments that I have about Rolex are similar to other brands, but there is nuance in the differences, or the differences are nuanced, and people still do want to listen because it is technically separate news. What I'm talking about with Rolex, even though my criticism is maybe at its core similar to my criticism about Cartier, for argument's sake, it is still different and new news. It's just creating content.
Actually, on Rolex, this is something I found so interesting about your take. You said you love Rolex, you love Cartier, and I'm thinking about this, so I don't know watches too much. My main thing is fashion, mostly streetwear. And there are, like, I wouldn't say my favorite brand is Gucci. Like, I wouldn't say, like, my favorite brand is the biggest, most obvious brand. So it's, in watches, is it not like that? Like, is Rolex really, and Cartier, are those really, like, the major guys? Is it not as competitive? Like, why do you think it's set up like that?
It's competitive, but Rolex is just one of the most powerful companies in the world. I mean, in almost every way, Rolex's even consumer feedback over a lifetime is so high, it's so dramatically higher than other brands in all different industries. Rolex is just almost a perfect company. It's unbelievable. From the way that they sell watches to their authorized dealerships, to the way that they make sure micromanage how those watches are then sold at retail, to their own brand image. Even if I don't like certain things about them, ultimately Rolex is making the mass market play, which you have to admire. Rolex doesn't make watches for me. Rolex doesn't make watches for people that talk about watches every day. Rolex makes watches for the world. And there's a big difference there. It's a company that I admire so much.
It's interesting they haven't fallen off either, because even like Ferrari, like their new Ferraris don't look as good as the old Ferraris. For real.
Yeah, they don't look as good, and they're criticized tremendously. Everyone, I mean, everyone has an opinion about the new Portofino. Everyone has an opinion about Ferraris and how crappy a lot of them are, and it's hysterical. Whereas Rolexes, even when you don't like a design decision or whatever it is, it's still incredible. I mean, like it or not, it's still they're still basically true to their core in many ways, or in most ways. Maybe they differ cosmetically, but it's so impressive what they do. I mean, their money into R&D, their infrastructure, it's just, everything is incredible. I don't know how they do it.
How does a company stay that consistent for that long, especially in the luxury market?
I'm certain it's circumstantial. I mean, what works for Rolex, is probably very unique. It's a private company. I'm sure that doesn't hurt it. Rolex is autonomous. They don't have to, respond to a conglomerate owner, which is huge. But they're also, I'm sure, led by just geniuses. I mean, it's hard to make it any fancier than that. They have all the money that they could possibly ever want, and I think that they hire the right people. It sounds so boring to say it, but it's true. That's why a lot of the time I don't even like talking about it. I like talking about brands that are still figuring themselves out, or still trying to grasp world attention, or even micro attention, or even like sub-market attention. That's interesting stuff, because it's like a live fight. You know what I mean? Like, whereas at the end of the day, Rolex always wins. Whereas if you're talking about Cartier, for instance, a brand that has had so much disaster in its history, or so much failure, it's pretty cool to watch year by year. Are they on the right track? Are they on the wrong track? How are they going to make sure that it's an important brand, not today, because it is an important brand today, but in 10 or 15 years? What are they doing? That's cool stuff.
So who do you think are the most important watchmakers right now then? Not Rolex, not Cartier, because you mentioned both of them, right? So like, who are some of these up and comers that you're really excited about?
I don't think that there really are many up and comers. There are a lot of independent brands that have, that are appreciated by, watch geeks. But I don't think they're necessarily going anywhere, certainly anywhere quickly. You got a brand, FP Journe. It's an independent manufacturer. They just sold 20%, I believe. I could be lying about that number, to Chanel. So they have taken on money now. So it's interesting to see, okay, how will Chanel impact the operation of that company? That's pretty interesting. The watch industry, like anything, yeah, you can look at it from point of view of the watches themselves and look at what's going into them and how good are they. That sounds ghetto, but you know what I mean. How what they're doing, or you can look at it from the business point of view, which is really where I end up most of the time. You've got a brand like Bulgari that can't decide if they want to be a manufacturer of truly great watches, which they have some, or they want to make BS stuff and cash in on just cheap kind of dumb buyers, not stupid people, but people that are just spending money frivolously. Doing a partnership with Maserati is just a cheap and easy way to sell more watches to Maserati owners. That's not inventive. That's not going to make you an important brand. You know what I mean? But some of their decisions do. It's very interesting to watch.
How did you decide, or how do you still decide to do resale versus creating your own brand versus selling new watches? Like, how did you find out that this is what you want to do and keep doing?
There are a lot of things. I mean, creating your own brand is, I feel like the issues and difficulties associated with it are just things that I'm not really interested in conquering. If you're creating your own brand, you're so limited. I really do love exploring, these important watches of the past. I think it's so great when I'm able to, find a vintage Breitling that's truly important, or a vintage Rolex, or Hoyer, or Le Coultre. It's really cool stuff. It's always interesting. It's always something new. When you own your own brand, that's it. You're selling, the same one product, or over the course of the 3 years, 3 products a year. Not to mention the risk is way higher. When I invest in watches, I mean, it's hardly a risk. It's liquid. I mean, it's a liquid asset. There's no depreciation.
Someone's going to want to buy a Rolex.
Exactly right. So even if I don't make money, I'm still not going to lose any money. Whereas if I make a Theo and Harris watch tomorrow, could it be a tremendous success? Of course. But if I execute it poorly, that 300 grand I just spent on watches, that's worth nothing. It's worth zero. No one wants it. Whereas with Rolexes, even if I had to sell my inventory at cost, we're still fine. We can rebuild. You see what I mean?
So it's classic. Theo and Harris is a classic import and export business.
Yeah, I mean, we flip watches. I mean, it's not really much more fancy than that. I mean, nothing that we do, I think, is truly inventive. We do things that other companies have been doing long before us. We curate a collection of vintage watches and we market them, and that's it. What we've done that for some reason other people aren't doing in our market is invest a lot of time and energy and money into building a community to build retail business, or even jumping off of that, advertising business. There are some companies that have done it. Hodinkee is a leader in our field. They do a tremendous job. It's a really great company. But apart from them, who are the top dogs, there's really no one other than us that's doing what we do, which puts us in an amazing position.
So what's the business model? Are you selling... You're making money from watches. Are you selling sponsored videos to these watch companies, advertising on the YouTube?
Now we're building an advertising business that will integrate, brands, whether it's a micro watch brand like we were talking about before, or it's a complementary brand like a clothing brand. We just launched a partnership with an Italian bespoke menswear company, like truly creme de la creme. I mean, the best stuff kind of in the world. We just launched a partnership with them just last week. We hosted an event and did a launch video and rolling out something over the next basically 6-8 months kind of engagement. It's going to be amazing. I have the opportunity to introduce my fans and clients to another company. They're going to be so happy I did, because now their Rolodex of companies that are incredible is increased by 1, and naturally we get to monetize that relationship.
So that's so valuable, being able to find, whether they're advertising with you or not, just being able to find the best companies in the world and to be trusted and not pick a company that's not the best and say they're the best. Like, just to have that as an asset, that reputation is huge.
Yeah, and the truth is, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a lot of luck. I mean, the best relationships that I have, I didn't earn. I really mean that. The best relationships that I have, I met them over a drink, like by luck. Like, that's it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm the best in my field. They had to come and see me, or I thought of creative ways to knock down their door and get in. No, I'm having a drink in Soho, and I end up meeting a guy wearing a really cool vintage Omega. He happens to own a tremendous custom menswear company that's just now kind of growing. You build from there. So I definitely do believe, even though I'm a little bit of an introvert in as far as like B2B business, I really do believe in just being out there and being social. A lot of things really do happen. It's amazing.
Well, there's something key to what you just said. It's that way in. So for instance, with fashion, if I see somebody wearing Supreme or like Comme des Garçons or something, I'll point it out. It's the same. It sounds like it's the same with you in watches. You see somebody wearing a fancy watch, immediately now you have a way in.
Exactly right. I say all the time, I mean, I've sat down with people that are far more important than I'll ever be, probably far more influential and intelligent and successful because we have a common interest in watches. That's it. So why not use it as, an opportunity? I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to use it. You know what I mean?
What would your advice be? Let's say they were just trying to get started, right? Let's say they had a vintage Rolex. How would they sell it? Where do you find a buyer for that kind of thing?
It's tough. I mean, there are so many ways even now for a layperson, someone who doesn't own a vintage watch retail company, to sell directly to a consumer. Now, if you've put yourself out there on social media, again, not as a reseller, but just as a person with a face, their followers feel like they know them. There's a trust there. There's an inherent trust. So that's quite common now. It's not even a rare thing. So yeah, if you have a Rolex or if you have anything, you can leverage that trust and those relationships to sell that thing. That sounds very easy because it is.
It is.
That wasn't the truth 5 years ago. You couldn't do that before Instagram and all these things. To be on YouTube and to be creating content, now you're a content creator. To be on Instagram, you're just a person. Everyone has Instagram. That can turn a layperson into a retailer, even if just once, very quickly and easily.
Have you been trying a bunch of different marketing tactics and nothing's working? I would love to work with you one-on-one to figure out exactly what's wrong. Whether you're using cold email to get billion-dollar clients on board, like I've done for most of the Fortune 500 for our clients, or you're using YouTube videos. We have over 23,000 subs, so I know something about that. Or sales strategy. Sold millions and millions of dollars in business-to-business transactions. If you're dealing with issues in any of those, I would love to have a one-on-one consulting call with you. You can get more info on that at experiment27.com/consulting. So a lot of entrepreneurs think they need some kind of epic new business idea, but all you really need to do is post it on Craigslist, post it on Facebook, post it somewhere, and you could probably sell it for something. You can build an entire business around that.
Yeah, definitely. And the big difference, which is worth hundreds of dollars on a small scale and thousands or millions of dollars at scale, is trust. If you can create and then monetize trust, you're going to get more at scale. You're going to get more for your watch or anything, your couch or whatever it may be, on Instagram on a personal kind of basis than you would on Facebook Marketplace or you would on Craigslist. On Craigslist, that's just an item. The item is selling for what it is. That's it. Whereas when you're leveraging, like I said, that reputation you've built on a social medium, that is money. That's again, even if it's just worth $75 this time or $110 this time, you do it twice, and then before you know it, you've put an extra $1,000 in your pocket. I mean, it really is amazing what can be done.
Do you have big buyers where, like, let's say anytime you get a Cartier in or anytime you get a watch from a specific year, you like go out to them and like show them all your watches and they buy them all?
I have a couple of big clients. I have a couple of people that will spend north of $50,000 over the course of a year on watches. Usually that's not a high quantity of watches. Our biggest clients, they buy an individual watch that is $20 or $30 or $40,000. So they're not necessarily buying 4 or 5 watches in a year, but the value of their purchase is so high. We offer a service, not to many people, so not at big scale, but here and there, where it kind of becomes an investment advisor. There's a lot of money to be made in watches, and some, specifically, I guess, wealthy people have decided, okay, well, if I invest $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 under your management, what kind of can my return be? Which is another interesting business model that we've explored and executed on. Again, not a big part of our business, but certainly something that we do.
It's funny. They do it in art too. They do it in movies. And I really think, like, it's not to make money. That's just the way they justify buying a crap ton of watches.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, it definitely depends on the person. I know some guys that really love watches that will do it. And I know some people that they just have eyes and they're perceptive and they see the market exploding and they'll buy these $200,000 in watches, put them in the safe, and then wait for my text message to sell them. It depends on the client.
That's got to be pressure, right? Or like, how do you deal with that recommendation? Like, so you don't see it as pressure. So how do you think about that? So you're going to recommend this guy buy $200,000 in watches. What's going through your mind right there? Like, what are you trying to do to get up to the point where you're confident enough to make that recommendation?
I live and breathe in this market. So everything, most of the recommendations and insight that I give these clients, which again, there's less than 10 that I have. It's stuff that I already know. It's not like, oh, I have to go out and do research for you. It's no, you send me $65,000 and I'll give you 9 watches and they'll be worth 30% more. You know what I mean? Like it really is. It's a lot easier because I'm in it every day. I live and breathe it. I know where to get the stuff, and I have seen such patterns that are so easy to read. I think that, like, stocks confuse the shit out of me. Like, I do not get the stock market at all, but I really get watches.
And you don't even need the stock market.
No, so you really don't. I mean, the only difference is it is quicker cash. I mean, when you want to sell stock, you sell stock. You have your money in I don't know, quickly. I don't buy and sell stock, but you have your money quickly. Whereas with watches, you know, you have to. There's a selling process. You don't just call someone, your money's there that day. And if you do, you're probably not getting top dollar. Again, what's the difference between a $200,000 watch and a $225,000 watch? Nothing. You know, it's the difference is what the price you quoted. Someone that wants a $220,000 watch will probably also pay $220. You see what I mean? So it's just a matter of how much of a rush is this person in? Do they have a second? And that's something that I really like to, you know, establish with those clients that I have relationships with. Listen, the money that you're investing, is this money that you may need immediately, like all of a sudden, or is this really extra money that could go to sleep? Because if you call me up on a Thursday, say, hey, I need all that money back immediately, you're going to suffer losses, or you know, I have to prepare you to suffer losses. You know, selling these things can take weeks.
In the art market, they won't even sell to you if they even get a whiff that you're going to want the money back, or you're going to even want to resell the painting to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not a matter of, no, like I told you it'll appreciate, but you can never see that. You can absolutely sell the watch and make money, of course. But if you say, hey, I need the watch, I need the money, and by tomorrow, you're probably going to lose money. You know, dealers smell the blood in the water, and they're going to offer you low numbers. And ultimately, because they're the ones that are the key holders, the people that will buy this from you, you're just screwed.
Do you deal with like fakes and forgeries? Is this something that people are trying to do often? Sell you fake watches?
Oh yeah, I mean it just depends at the kind of stuff you're working in. Like in vintage Rolex sub $10,000, there really isn't much fake and forgery going on. In modern Rolex, at every price point, there's tremendous fake and forgery. I don't deal in modern Rolex really, or certainly not at scale, so I don't really have to come in contact with that. Vintage, you start to see a lot of fakes coming in above 10 grand. That becomes really, really worth it. With a vintage watch, to give you like an example. So a Rolex GMT is a watch that's produced by Rolex in the 1950s. They've made a couple of references to the GMT, but each reference has so many different variations. A very small line of text on a dial could be worth $10,000 or $20,000. So if someone can figure out how to apply or how to kind of just make this small line on a dial, they can elevate the value of a watch from $25,000 to $35,000 or $39,000 in days, right? So it becomes very, very scary and very risky to be buying. So when I make an investment at that scale or purchase at that price, I don't do it alone. I have people that I'll consult with, people that have been in this business for 20, 30 years that of course do profit from their advice, but it's just too risky to do alone. You know, you need a team of experts.
It sounds so stressful because they do this in the art market too. Like they'll take an actual painting from the 40s and then they'll paint out people, or they'll like paint something in it to increase the value. It sounds like it's the same thing.
Yeah. Have you seen Sour Grapes on Netflix?
Maybe a while ago. That's the one with Vaynerchuk, right? He's smelling the dirt, eating the dirt.
No, that's different. Sour Grapes is about a guy, I forget his name. I think Rudy Srinivasan, something like that. I'm mispronouncing it, but something like that. Anyway, he was tremendous. He was a part of an organization that forged wine, that recreated collectible wines. And the beauty of it, if you're looking at it from his point of view, is if I'm forging a bottle of wine that's worth $60,000 or $70,000, and the bottle of wine is from 50 or 70 or even more than that years ago, really, how many authorities are in the world to say what this bottle tastes like, right? Not to mention the fact that not every bottle of that wine has aged the same. So really, even of the people who have tasted legit wine, like, can they really say that this is not legit? So there are scarier markets than watches, I think wine being one of them.
Well, there's even the psychological aspect. It's like this in art too, where a lot of people, like if you get a painting and it's from the 40s and there's like a 99% chance it's real and a 1% chance it might be fake, you're going to say it's real every time because you want the money from the painting.
Yeah, and that was the funny thing about that movie. They introduced this character who's I don't know if I can say this in the show, but he's a real douche. And the stupid rich guy. When I say stupid rich guy, I mean like he has a lot of money. I don't mean like he's an idiot. He has a ton of money. And he's a really, really arrogant dude. And he's bragging about his knowledge of wine, yada 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 yada, blah blah blah. Shut up. And he's drinking this really expensive bottle of, I think it was Burgundy, and he's just talking about it, waxing poetic. And the guy at the table goes, "This is fake, and you're stupid." like you're just an idiot. You just spent $6,000 on a bottle of fake wine, you ass. And he's like, "Well, how do you know?" And he's like, "Because I've had the real thing 12 times before." and I know what I'm talking about. So it's funny. A lot of people want to believe what they have is real. John Mayer got into a big lawsuit or filed a big lawsuit against a big American dealer not too long ago for several $100,000, if not a couple $1 million over fake watches.
Well, because he's a huge collector.
John Mayer's a huge collector.
I saw that in one of the documentaries about him. One of his tours, he just had this box. I guess he has several boxes that are just filled with these vintage watches. I always wonder, like, people like that, are they wearing the watches? You just want like a different watch every day? It is mostly investment, right?
I don't know. It depends on the person. It's definitely a way to justify it, because the truth is, if you are willing to sell them, you will either break even or make money on many of these watches. And the more, like I said, the more seasoned you are, the less likely you are to lose money. You can tell a novice collection pretty quickly. I did a deal with someone pretty recently. Well, with watches, it was a collection of 50 or 60 watches. Some watches he made 25,000 on. Some watches he lost 25,000 on. And I said, well, obviously you were just kind of buying not necessarily intelligently. You weren't buying with information. You're buying on emotion. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Salute if you want it. Enjoy. But obviously, if you cared about investment, you would not have built this collection.
It seems like it's better because you're plugging into a market. There are people that want vintage watches, and so you're just another guy that's selling vintage watches, and you're doing it
absolutely
better. Are there any tips you'd have within there? So like, you're going into this competitive market of watches. What are some things people should be doing to separate themselves, either in watches or in any sort of business like that where it's very competitive?
Yeah, I really do think that one of the things, maybe if the thing that has made us so successful in our field, is this ability to open up and develop real relationships and invest real time into that. A lot of people just are not interested in it. When we first had it, started seeing success, we always knew that YouTube and Instagram was going to be successful, right? You had like Gary Vaynerchuk, who I basically grew up in his shadow. I grew up like 10 minutes from Wine Library. So you had Gary Vaynerchuk always talking about the value in this, and how we just keep doing it, just shut up, put your head in the dirt, and just keep doing this. And it will work. So you genuinely believed it was going to work. But when it started to work, I remember taking a sigh and saying, geez, it's just starting to work. I wonder how long we have until our competitors catch on and they start doing the same thing. I wonder how much time we have before our competitors catch up and figure this out and kick our ass, because frankly, they were at the time, they were way better funded, so they could easily crush us on Instagram or on YouTube. But they just didn't.
They could have done it for way cheaper too. Like, you pay some kid exactly like you, right? You pay
exactly
somebody $2,000 a month to make videos on the side. Like,
yep.
Yeah, it's just they would never
They just
it.
didn't
That's
do
so
it.
Interesting.
And it's 4 years later and they still haven't done it. And then I laugh. I mean, a lot of the people that were in our business before we entered, they weren't very good at it. They were just the only people, so they were making a fortune. But now the big players have changed dramatically. I mean, I would love to see like the chart of who's doing well and who's not. You can kind of tell, but I would love to like watch the evolution over the last 4 years, because the people that were willing to embrace social media have done well, and the ones that aren't. That's it. It's so cut and dry.
It's like that in every market too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you wanted to create like a Fruit of the Loom, like a t-shirt company, you totally could. If you wanted to do like, vintage watches, vintage clothing, just anything that people are already buying, like even buying and selling like dried fruit or something. You could do anything like
I have
that.
really almost no interest in having a product that people don't want and having to create interest in it. Yeah, there's benefit there because you're the only one selling a product, whatever. But having to create interest is very, very difficult. Business is hard enough as it is. You know what I mean? Like, I think that our abilities, our talents were just they were put to use better and more efficiently in a market. The products themselves already had big demand. I don't think it would have worked as well in a different field.
Definitely. All right, Christian, where can people check you out online?
Over at theoandharris.com, you can take a look at our collection of vintage watches. If you're interested in watch content or watch news, over on Theo and Harris on YouTube. And if you just want some watch porn, some daily photos, or some really, really cool stuff, Theo and Harris on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, man.
Do you run a successful business that sells to other businesses but feel like you could be doing more? Well, at Experiment 27, that's exactly what we help other businesses do. Our focus is finding cornerstone clients, finding people in the Fortune 500, or finding brands that are over $15, $20, $30 million in revenue, a lot of times billion-dollar brands, and using our marketing tactics such as cold email or targeted content to find those customers and sell them on your business. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to learn how we met with, it's most of the Fortune 500 at this point, along with dozens of billion-dollar brands, companies like Krispy Kreme, Walmart, Morgan Stanley, and a ton of other ones, go over to experiment27.com. We'd love to chat.